Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I didn't have to go far this week. Usually I have to find somewhere in the dark crevices of the world to find these awesome people. I found somebody right here in Wisconsin, a good friend. And we're going to talk about something that is like we all think about, but it's really a challenge. And, the reality is we have a story to tell as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a sales professional, whatever your lot in life is, you have a story to tell. And it's kind of stops right there because we struggle with how to tell it, who to tell it to, where to tell it, why. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Jim Colhart. Jim Colhart, how are you today, sir?
Very well, Dave. How about you?
I'm well, thank you so much. You are president of Saturn Lounge, and I'm super excited. I love the name Saturn Lounge, and I've been a fan of yours forever. And so I'm super excited to jump into some stuff today and tell the world what Saturn Lounge is and what's going on over there these days.
Well, Dave, the feeling is mutual. I'm excited to be a guest. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Saturn Lounge is a marketing agency, and we help businesses grow. That's really my passion and our
Sure.
stake in the ground. And we use marketing skills and expertise and experience to tell really effective, engaging stories and deliver them to the intended audience. There's both factors are involved, right?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the growth, everyone, raise your hand if you don't want to grow, right? I don't think you'd have very many people raise their hand. But as soon as you get to somebody to say, yes, I want to grow, there's hundreds, probably thousands of different ways to grow a business, right? And
Yes.
there's so many different things to do. So for somebody listening, I'm assuming that you come alongside somebody, they might have a really good idea and they have this story to tell. But again, it kind of stops with my family and friends, right? I've sold everything, I've sold all my friends, I've sold to my family, whatever it is, right? And it's like, I want to get to the next level. I want to find people that never have heard of me, and I probably don't have a Coke or Pepsi budget. So, it's one of those scenarios where I can't be everywhere. So that's got to be really hard to kind of start this process. So I come to you and say, Jim, I want you to grow my business. Okay. So go ahead, right? It's like, now what do I do? So when you have somebody that comes to you, or maybe somebody listening that is in that growth spot, what's kind of the first step in your world to help them achieve that growth?
Well, we really, focus on learning about their business.
Okay.
What makes them successful? We like to understand history, but we really focus a lot on where are we at right now. And I mean, we've told some really good history stories. Sometimes that's of interest to an audience, or really of interest to an entity, just to get that out there. But the bottom line is we want to understand what's making you tick right now,
Okay.
and 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 then we need to figure out who that audience is, right? So who are the most likely buyers of your product or service, and where are they out there in the world, and how can we reach them? So
Do
it's a
most
combination of
oh, go ahead.
understanding their business, coming up with creative storytelling ideas for their marketing, and then, again, finding that audience.
Do you think that most entrepreneurs, Jim, know who their audience is? When you talk to your clients, do they have a good idea? Or, like for me, I know I struggle with that because I think, oh my gosh, anybody needs what I have, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have this thought process like I'm like water, everybody needs me, right? But
Right.
yet, obviously, if you're that vague, you're never going to really be able to, to capture your audience. So how do you drill down for somebody listening on the who part? Who do I go after? Who is my ideal customer, and what do they look like? How do you do
You,
that?
yeah, usually we really focus on who have been their best clients historically,
Okay.
however they landed those clients. And then a lot of times, the owner or whoever is in charge of marketing has a belief and interest. Very seldom do we work with huge international companies that spend millions of dollars on research.
Okay.
So we're an agency of 30 people, and consequently we're working with businesses that typically don't have multi-million-dollar marketing research budgets, but the marketing leadership will have some idea of who they believe is their ideal customer or their best customer. But it's funny, like everything in life, we have some clients and prospects where they really have that dialed in, and we
Yeah.
have others where they need a lot of help with that part of the process.
Sure.
Okay. Lots of times, maybe they make a really great widget, and that's kind of carried them to where we are at the moment. And now they're looking to grow, and they don't really have a good understanding of the rest of it. They built a better mousetrap,
Sure.
and now they need help growing from there.
Well, and I think that's a great place to start. So for people listening, one of the first steps would be to do, what Jim just said, is kind of look at your existing clients that are successful and see what, you'll start to see some patterns, or like, Jim said, where did you find them? I think it's safe to say that we all know surface wise what our customer is, but I remember doing it in my past job, in my past company that I owned. I remember we had like 5 characteristics of an ideal client, and one of them was like the owner of the business was actively involved in the decision making process of, so obviously smaller businesses for us. But, when we came across a business that was huge, and there may be the owners weren't even local or whatever, we didn't have nearly the success. So are there some basics? Are there things out of bounds, or is it just like a blank sheet of paper and you just start writing things down that you feel are going to be characteristics that you look for? What guidance could you give people?
Well, it's truly more that blank sheet of paper, because each circumstance is unique. Like you do see, repeating patterns to some degree, trends. Okay. But when you really have an opportunity to get inside and understand a business and what makes it tick, why it's successful, where it struggles, those are unique, usually very much so to that entity. So okay. we go in completely open-minded. Okay. And our mission, our goal is to deliver the absolute highest return on your marketing investment. And marketing is more measurable today than ever before because of all the digital channels we can utilize. And sometimes those digital channels aren't the best option for the business, but in any case, that's really what we focus on, is what can you afford to invest in marketing? And then we look at that bucket and say, what's going to be most impactful, both right away, but typically with more of a longer term view, because that's a factor too, right? You want to try and do something really quick here that maybe won't have as much staying power, or are you looking for a longer term, execution here that typically would be superior in the long run? Sure.
Well, and I guess that's a really good point that, what's your reason for doing your marketing? Sometimes we wake up and, our sales are down and we want to throw a couple dollars at something thinking that that's going to be a quick fix. But to your point, this isn't really a sprint as much as this is a marathon. And it's hard for entrepreneurs that are like, I want to get rich today. I want to do a drive-through today. I don't want to wait. Right. So, that's really good wisdom. And I think that's probably hard. And some of you listening right now are probably resisting that, which it's okay. But the reality is we got to be thinking outside of our normal comfort zone and outside of the box. And if you're used to, putting an ad in somewhere and the phone ringing within 24 to 48 hours, that's not bad. But I think what Jim's talking about here is finding these clients, and these are longer term relationships. These are bigger things than just, clipping off one or two at a time. But I want to ask you a question that you brought up, because I think measuring your return on your investment, I think at least one, like I said, when I had my business years ago, we were at a point, we had 22 people on our team and we were clipping along doing 10 million in sales annually. And what we ended up with was, getting a call from a marketing firm, on a regular basis. And we're like, what's the return on the investment? That was kind of like one of my first questions. The way I'm built, my disc profile says I want a return on my investment, right? And so if I don't get a return, I'm not really that interested. And there wasn't really good data out there 10, 15 years ago, at least that we found. So what do you say to somebody that's like, Jim, I'll drop a bunch of money with you. What do I get in return? How do you quantify that nowadays?
Well, with all the digital delivery, so what we can do with search and social media advertising is really trace the effectiveness, because of the ability to track everything that's happening on the web. We've all been dealing with it as consumers for quite a while, so it's no surprise at this stage.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know some of the newer iPhone technology in particular has allowed consumers to maybe not be tracked quite as carefully, but in general, you're still able to show that display ads, video ads, anything comes back to the website, and consequently you can show your clients how many qualified leads they're getting from these types of sources. Now, when in the end you decide that a billboard or 4 or 5 billboards is going to be most effective, that's still pretty hard to measure. There's just,
Sure.
you can ask as the owner, as the salesperson, how did you find out about our company?
Yeah.
And occasionally someone will say, I saw the billboard. But in general, that's more of a brand awareness lift.
Okay.
And you're not going to be able to measure it as carefully, as accurately.
So once we have this hoop under our belt where we have a pretty good feel for what this avatar looks like, we have an idea what ideal client we're going for, I think it leads right into the next question of how do you deliver that story? Like you said, is it a website? Is it a billboard? Is it social media? And there's probably a lot that I have no clue about. If I have a limited budget, billboards just seems to be way outside my comfort zone. As far as, like you said, will it track into something that really turns into the phone actually ringing? So how do you wrestle somebody in when they come to you and they know who they want to target, but they're like, all right, I have 10 choices, or, I want to put on the first hole at the local country club, I want to put my sign. I mean, there's so many places. Right. How do you rein people in?
Well, it really, that part of it, you asked a couple of good questions. One is the storytelling part of it. The other is the, reaching the audience part of it. And when it comes to that part, you really do have to carefully examine, is everyone, is this a consumer offering that every homeowner could utilize, every living, breathing person? Or is this more of a niche B2B situation where you're making something that only 1 out of 10,000 businesses or whatever consider buying,
Sure. Yep.
Completely different circumstances, right? And therefore completely different execution from a delivery standpoint. From a storytelling standpoint, that's so much fun for us. We pride ourselves on really coming up with unique and creative ways to tell stories. And I can't tell you how many times we've been in meetings, and right during the first visit, our creative director or someone in the room will have an idea, and you can see people kind of lean forward and go, we never thought of that. And that's it. It's like when you have that big idea, that's a real magical moment. And from there, usually things are real fun, So we know that buyers are avoiding salespeople for the most part because of all the technology at our fingertips. So obviously, foundationally, a very effective website is job one.
Sure.
Very few people will buy anything, beyond a dollar or two, something on the run without checking out a website, right?
Sure.
How does this company present itself on the web? So
Okay.
if your website doesn't make a really good impression, typically, unless there's another way they're connected to you, they're just going to avoid you altogether.
Sure.
And
Yep.
move on, because there's probably 10, 15, 20 websites in the category to click on, right?
Yep.
So that website is of paramount importance. And then video and photography are so important in terms of delivering that positive impression. Obviously a well-written message is critical. But when you have just superior video content, superior imagery reflecting what you do for your customers, your clients, it just makes such a big difference to have that professional touch in those areas.
Sure. Well, and I know that, in some of the meetings that we've been in together where I brought in some people and you've done some work for, it's one of those scenarios, like you said, there's a group of you guys and then there's a client and me, and, all of a sudden the lights start going on and people are like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. I love that energy, right? That's so positive. There's a ton of great stuff that goes on in that spot. The reality is, though, I go back to my ROI question, because there's probably a lot of people listening here that this question. How do you you could have the killer website, right? I mean, the thing can, make your breakfast for you. It can butter your toast, whatever, right? But the reality is how in the world do we convert that into somebody calling me? How do we, because again, it's one thing to have a beautiful something, but how do we get that to actually convert into some action from their perspective? Is there anything that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the obvious answers are to having effective calls to action on the site. It's kind of a 101 from a marketing standpoint, just basic blocking and tackling, but you need to kind of professionally and politely reach out via the website and ask for that call or that email inquiry. So having call to action buttons in the right places throughout the site. Some people prefer to call and talk to a human being still, like old guys like me. And a lot of younger consumers really don't want to have to do that. So they want to be able to email or text for information. And you want to have all those options available to the consumer, to the potential buyer. And a lot of times an impactful offer sweetens the pot, right? So some kind of reward for acting typically works better in a consumer B2C environment. 20% off your first order. Something like that. A little harder in a B2B environment. Guys like you and I that are more on the business consulting side, that's a little more difficult, right? But we offer a free, no obligation marketing ecosystem review, and that allows us to learn about that business. We ask for an hour of time, and with the owner or the VP of marketing, whoever's really making the decision on marketing partnerships. And an hour gets us a good foundational understanding, the inside baseball stuff that they're not going to talk about on their website or their social media, right? And that allows us to then go back, do our research, and come back with some initial high level, ideas.
Gotcha. Well, and I was just curious, like your call to action, sometimes I see click here for whatever. I mean, some of them are really not emotional, Jim. And I feel like if you're not emotional, I mean, does your call to action need to kind of pull at your heartstrings a little bit? I mean, it just feels weird to click here to learn more or click here for a brochure. And it's just like, it seems mechanical, you know, as opposed to click here if you want to learn the rest of the story, or click here to find out what happened in, what was the end of this journey. And I'm just curious, and obviously the product plays a part, but are these emotional type things that we're trying to get these people to react to?
Yeah, some of them, and yeah, click here for a brochure. I know you were just throwing out an example, but the website should be serving as a brochure, so
Sure.
that's probably a pretty low impact
Gotcha.
call to
Yeah. Yeah.
action, you know, in
I've
2020.
seen them. I mean, I've seen them. And so I'm just
Yeah,
like, man, this is like dry as all
yeah.
get up.
Yeah, that I can't imagine moving the needle tremendously, but emotion can work, financial incentive can work. Um, Creative approaches are good if they're not too cutesy. But the bottom line is you just want to encourage the consumer, the potential client to engage, you know, unless it's an e-commerce situation, you know. Simple transactions are happening all over the web, right? So
Yeah.
a percentage of our clients are e-commerce clients, and there we're just trying to make the sale.
Wow. Well, hey, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Awesome. Well, so you talk about engagement, and I think, you know, customer engagement, getting a customer to do something is really where that's our goal, right? We're getting them to pick it up, pick the phone up, click something.
Yeah.
You know, so is that the why? I mean, we hear this why and we hear about, you know, this kind of deeper perspective. You know, do you talk much about why people are doing what they're doing,
Yeah.
or why they're at this spot? Kind of help unpack that for us if you could, Jim.
Yeah, a lot of potential clients we encounter, they haven't done a good job of communicating the why,
Okay.
explaining the why. And we agree that that's important to a lot of potential customers. So that brings a more personal touch to the message.
Okay.
Like we you know, everyone I meet, when you view our website, you know, we're here to help you grow your business, and we use marketing to do that, you know.
Gotcha.
And the why component is something we try and really understand and then bring to life. We run into very few websites that are maxed out in every way. I mean, it takes a lot.
Sure.
A high performing website is not only well designed, set up properly from an SEO standpoint with all you know, every detail on the technical side, but then is offering new content regularly. You know, for a lot of businesses, it's maybe not practical to have new content monthly, but if you don't have new content every, you know, 2 to 3 months,
Sure.
your website's going to be stagnant pretty quickly.
Does that
So
include like a blog? Does that include, I mean, you
yes,
don't have to do like are you changing?
no,
What does that mean? So for people listening
yes,
that just were like, oh my gosh, Jim, you mean I got to redo my site every two?
no, that's a good question, Dave.
You got 30 people there. My gosh, this is unfair, Jim.
Yeah, no, that's not practical, obviously, but it's a good question. We're talking about case studies,
Okay.
blogs. You know, those are the two easiest, right? Here's something new we just did for client A.
Gotcha.
Here's something we did to help the community, you know, just fresh content, announcing any kind of events that you're participating in, attending, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
News. Yeah, we're not at all recommending it to redo your website every year. That would be for most businesses just completely unnecessary.
Sure.
And people ask me, how long should a website last for your company? And that also depends on how much. If you're doing regular content improvements and additions, you get more life out of it, you know.
Sure.
But when you create a new website and then let it sit for 4 years, you know, it's probably going to look like it could use an upgrade at that point.
Well, and again, your part of what you guys offer and help people with is understanding the back end of it, because I've seen it where a website's out there and then we just make the assumption it's like putting a shingle out and nobody shows up.
Yeah.
You know, we have to tweak the wording, we have to tweak some things along the way. So I'm assuming once you have a website, that's kind of just like the beginning. Now we still have to directed in the right spot. We have
Yeah.
to change it as needed, keep it fresh. So
Yeah.
if somebody has an older site, is adding that blog or white paper or case study or what's new type of thing, is that a way to kind of extend the life a little bit of a website?
It can be potentially,
Okay.
but some websites are just, ready for an upgrade.
Yeah.
It so much depends on what the quality level is. How is the site performing? Based on the way it was built, is it still loading quickly for users? Is the design, kind of a fresh, engaging design? A lot of sites are just lacking in that basic area.
Yeah.
So we're able to provide honest feedback. And again, from day one, my message to the team has always been, we're only doing what's in the best interest of our clients, and we'll be successful in the long run if we're always looking out for our clients' best interests. So it's never a scenario where we recommend something that's just not needed, because it would be bad business to do that. There's 100 things that are needed. Why recommend something that isn't needed?
Yeah.
That's maybe one of the advantages we have at Saturn Lounge, is that we're able to help in so many areas. If you're working with just a company that makes websites, they're probably going to find a way to try and convince you to make a website. But when you're working with a fuller marketing agency, that can help with video and photo content and content creation and email campaigns and social media campaigns and search campaigns and TV commercials and radio campaigns, we can figure out together what should be done next. And it's not always the website, but if we meet someone new and their website's 7 years old and doesn't even work, we're going to start there.
Sure.
Because we know that that's where people are going to check them out.
Gotcha. Well, and that's the thing is people never know that, or people think in their mind, this is probably blind spot. I'll never be on TV. I'll never need a radio ad. I think that from what I've watched your team work, you guys really help the client with their blind spots, because you may think in your mind coming into this, I don't need this and I only need that. That's like walking into the ER and saying, I'll never forget, this is how men's egos are, right? So I play a ton of racquetball, and one of my racquetball buddies is a knee surgeon. So after 40 years of playing 3 or 4 times a week, my knees were starting to go. So I go to Josh and I say, Josh, man, I think it's my ICL. I have no clue what ICL meant. I heard it somewhere, so I wanted to like I knew what I was talking about. And he's like, well, what made you think of that? And he's like, well, what about this? And then he starts going and just like totally humbling me, right? Yeah. And it's like so normal for an entrepreneur to like act like they know what they're talking about. And again, it's so funny. In marketing, it's kind of the same way, because who wants to say I have no clue what I'm doing, right? Yeah. Number one, you lose control. Number two, you feel like you're going to get taken to the cleaners. And number three, you're less of a man for whatever reason, right? Yeah. So I'm just curious, you guys seem to start at a pretty elementary level, like you said, of, hey, what's not working? What is working? So we build on that. What's not working? Those are probably 2 of your biggest questions. And then you kind of go from there, I'm guessing, is start there.
Those 2, and what are your goals?
Okay, great. Yeah.
And that gives us a really good foundation to start the conversation.
Wow.
So yeah, it's nice to, and I've worked really hard to build that. Saturn Lounge, we started as strictly a commercial photo studio. So, so we were doing photography for whoever needed professional photography, and that was fun. And then video, I'm going to say 12 years ago, it was around that 2010 time frame where all of a sudden video became the hot buzzword in marketing. Yeah. And I think I said no to maybe 2 people It was very rare because my theory, like many entrepreneurs, I've always believed say yes and then figure it out. But the
Yeah.
first couple that ask us about video, sorry, we don't. And then the third, I'm like, we got to figure that we got to just make a video here. And
Yeah.
and then video became just this huge growth area, but I still was seeing so many examples where we were making amazing videos and creating amazing images, and no one was ever seeing them and finding
Right.
them.
Sure.
And that's when I really decided we just need to be a marketing agency and be full service,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that was around 10 years ago.
Wow.
And
Well,
it's been a blast.
I remember the video. I still remember that. I think it was a girl jumping off your pier,
Yeah,
and you're selling the pier, you have that
yeah,
company that sells piers, and it's
yeah,
like, I mean, that to me is like, man, number one, I'm like super jealous that I don't have a pier. Number two, like now I want to be swimming. And number
yeah,
three, I want to be working. I mean, all the things that popped into my mind and the story that I started to tell just from that video,
yeah.
Jim, I think is so powerful. And I'm just shocked at how little a video are on websites, or how few times in the grand scheme of things we actually use video. So many people are visually oriented. 2 out of 3 people should learn by seeing something rather than by hearing it. So, that's what's really odd. And I'm just curious if I'm assuming your video has just taken off since,
Yeah,
last 10 years then.
huge, really strong category for us. We do a fair number of national TV commercials, which is fun when you see. We do commercials for Warner, so we see our commercials running on CBS and ESPN during the NCAA tournament.
So cool.
And
Why can't you have a little Saturn Lounge logo at the bottom? What's up with that? I mean, I
yeah,
can't believe you haven't figured that out yet, Jim.
a
Why?
handful of people have offered, but in general, yeah, the advertiser wants the billing.
That's
But
hilarious.
but yeah, it's really fun to create that kind of content. You talked about Lifetime Peers. They've been a client for a number of years, and they were an example where the smartest execution was to create a really, really amazing brochure and deliver it to everyone that lived on a lake. You
Yeah.
can buy a pier if you don't live on a lake, but there's really no reason to, right? So where the audience is. It's
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
the property owners on the lake.
Yeah.
First
Wow.
year we helped execute, the owner was like, I can't even keep up with the number of requests. Literally, we sent mailings out of state, and he admitted, he said, in the end I didn't even respond to those people because I had so many leads here in the
Sure.
southeastern Wisconsin that I just had to move on from those.
Wow.
That's the kind of problem we like to help create.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? So yeah, if you're listening and you don't have that problem and you want that problem, just call Jim. He'll be happy to create that problem.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, as we start to land, I want to turn the corner here real quick, because I know there's a ton of people that are listening that really either are in the ownership of their business and they're trying to find ways to transition out. You were successful in that in the past, couple years. So I'm just curious. So you started Saturn Lounge and you built this thing, and then you found somebody that wanted to take it over. How in the world did that happen? Fill us in, because I think there's a lot of people that will enjoy this story.
Yeah, the story might be enjoyable, but there's not necessarily much of a lesson. The truth of the matter is, my wife Amy and I were running the business, enjoying the process, not thinking or planning or trying in any way to sell.
Yeah.
It wasn't on our radar. Truthfully, our oldest son had come into the business after graduating from UW-Whitewater with an entrepreneurship degree. So the idea was, we'll take it until, however many years from now, and then our son Bennett will take over.
Sure.
Kind of like I did from my father-in-law. He was the original founder of Digital Color, which was our parent company for Saturn Lounge and still exists. So in April of 21, the Dan Hickey, who's the CEO at Kalmbach Media, just 5 minutes down the road, and a former Digital Color client that I worked with for a number of years, he reached out on LinkedIn and said, we're looking at potential strategic partnerships and acquisitions, and I'd like to get together. And I'm, of course, I'm not thinking acquisition, but strategic partnership. That's what I'm in play to offer to do. So we had lunch, and I pretty much told Dan, I'm flattered that you're a fan of the company, but we're really not interested in selling. But let's get together and talk about the strategic partnership. I'll bring our creative director. We'll talk about video photo for Kalmbach.
Sure.
And then the next morning, he was just Mr. Persistent. He just said, so what do you think of that acquisition idea? He emailed me, hey, thanks for joining me for lunch. What are your thoughts about that acquisition? Like, totally, basically didn't listen to what I had told him.
Sure.
And, so I said, you know what, let me talk to Amy over the weekend, and I'll get back to you. And for some reason, over the course of that weekend, Amy and I went from thinking that there was no reason to sell the business to thinking, why not consider the idea?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it would be in our best interest. This is obviously post-COVID. We had all struggled getting through our COVID and all the shutdowns with our businesses and things like that. It was against the law for me to do video and photo for several months in Wisconsin, right? Because I wasn't an essential business. So we had to just shutter our studio. And so we said, let's listen. So I'm a devout Christian. To me, it was just a God thing. Yeah. So there's no lesson to this is how you navigate to sell that I can offer. It's like, just do your best with your business, and maybe out of the blue, someone will come along that really wants to bring you into their tent. And for Amy and I, it really came down to Kalmbach will help us run the business and help us grow the business. And it was just a good time to take the offer.
Wow. Well, I think, you say there's not a lesson there, but I think that if you build your business, I mean, if people are watching, you may not think they're watching, right? But the reality is they're watching. And, when you do it the right way, you attract the right people, and all of a sudden somebody eventually, not everybody on this call is going to have phone calls that, hey, I want to buy your business. I think that the message is really, though, continue to do the right thing. You didn't even really know they were watching then, did you?
No, because they had not been a client for about 10 years.
Wow.
We had done a bunch of pre-press work for them for their book division back in the 2000s. And then they went all computer to plate, didn't need films and proofs any longer, obviously, for that operation. And never really broke in with the creative side with publications they were offering. So I think you're right, Dave, that is the lesson. I mean, I've always said, if you work hard, work smart, and treat people right, you'll make it. Those are just three basic tenets of how to approach things. And you just never know when someone might come along. But it's that classic case where you're not even looking for something that comes out of the blue.
Well, and I think about it. I laugh when I think about it. 10 years ago, if you would have irritated them or rubbed them the wrong way, or, not went that extra mile, that's why I always encourage people, man, if you're really trying to grow your company and you're not building your customers' experience and improving it, they kind of go so hand in hand. That's why I wrote Growing on Purpose, because, improving your customers' experience is part of growth. Yes. And it's, if you would have had a subpar, average service, and it just kind of would have been maybe not, depending on how Jim and Amy feel that day, we might like you or not like you, you probably wouldn't have got that call. So that's what I think is so unique, is something that happened 10 years ago is affecting you now. And we rarely think that far in advance or that far back, but I really think that's pretty cool.
Just bear with me for just a minute, because the
Yeah.
story is even better. The way, so 20 years ago, there was this individual who was working out of her home, producing covers for a little agency in Milwaukee. And I would deliver these proofs to her house, and she'd look at them and then either approve them, whatever the case being. Well, it was a tiny little client, but I treated her like she was our largest client at the time.
Yep.
And then one day I got a call and she said, "Hey, Jim, I'm now in charge of print production over at Kalmbach Media. Come on in."
There you go.
And that led to a significant pre-press client for 5 or 6 years, which then 10 years fast forward leads to the selling of the book. So if there is a nugget there, it's just treat everyone the best you can, and it'll work out for you.
Well, and Patton said, you know what, if a man does his best, what else is there? And I think that, that if we really truly can look at each other and say, I did my best, I mean, I know there's days where we're like, we held back, we didn't leave it all on the field, whatever, and those are okay. Generally speaking, hopefully people around us in general are going to say, man, that guy's got, he's got it. He knows what he's doing. She knows what she's doing. These people are really professional. And that's what I've always seen with all, anytime that you and I have had any dealings together, it's always like, man, I look forward to hanging out at your group, especially the attention to detail that you guys place on those pictures, looking around at your studio. It's like, oh my gosh, you know what? The drop of water is not in the right place on that pear. It's like, what the heck is that all about?
Yeah. No, you're right, Dave.
I love that attention to detail. So one last question, and I'm going to let you go. What would your tip of the day be? What's on your heart right now that you feel like somebody needs to hear? Maybe it's something we shared. Maybe it's something that we haven't shared yet.
The first advice I truly give people, Dave, if they ask me for advice, I don't care what field or endeavor they're in, because I'm a Christian, I say, read the Bible every day.
Sure.
That's something I do.
Yep.
And I get through the Bible in a year, and there's such value to staying connected to God and the Word that way. Now, there are people who don't want to have Christian or religious advice. So the other advice I actually heard when I was in my mid-20s, and I was at a sales conference when I was with AGFA. I was out west, and they had a presenter, and he gave this advice. He said, if you do these two things, you will succeed. And it's number one was find a reason to like everyone you meet, which comes so naturally to me because I just love people, and I know you're that way too.
Yeah.
And then just be mindful of what you say to people.
Yeah.
If you just, whatever area in business you are in life, if you just find a way to like people and be careful when you're talking with them about how you speak to them, people will gravitate to you, and you'll be successful.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, hey, and for people that don't think the Bible has a business acumen in there, I tell you, the book of Proverbs has some seriously helpful stuff on how to run a business, how to build a team. So there's a lot of stuff in there. So thanks for sharing that. If people want to learn more about Saturn Lounge, they want to connect with you, Jim, what's the best way for people to do that?
Well, I'm always happy to have a phone call. My cell number is 414-708-1428. Call me anytime. And if I can't
pick midnight on Saturday would be a great time to call you, hey?
Anytime. If I miss the call, I promise I'll get back in touch as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then my email address is jim.kohlhart@saturnlounge.com. KOHLHARDT. Jim.Kohlhart@saturnlounge.com. And we also have an info email address on our site that comes directly to me too.
Wow. There's a little well-known fact. It comes right to Jim. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, this has been awesome. I love all that you're doing locally and nationally and internationally. It's so cool to see a local company with such a big reach. And hopefully for people listening, you walked away with something. And, it's so easy to jump into our next activity, to go do our next, podcast or whatever. Just take a second and think about something that maybe Jim said today that is something that you could actually put into play right away. Maybe it's just looking at, writing down some things about your clients. Maybe it's something about understanding about your transition and what you'd like to see in the next chapter of your life. Whatever Jim shared today, I just really don't want it to fall on deaf ears. I really want it to resonate with you. Reach out to him. He's a great guy. You normally see him on the sidelines at the Milwaukee Bucks games because he's got like the best seats ever. And so you can see him there. He's listening in on the conversation of what's going on at the Bucks. And he's got definitely has his finger on the pulse of what's going on in marketing. So thank you so much for hanging out. And again, can't wait to keep learning from you and appreciate all that you do.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I really enjoyed the visit and feel the same way. Love our friendship and the opportunity to spend this time with you today.
Awesome.